All right. So we have created a React app. I'm going to get into that app. Oh, no. Just intro code dot. I'll blow this up. I don't care about the release notes. All right, so you know what's great is if I open up my little terminal here and I run npm test. Dun 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 dun. No test found. Run all tests. Boom. We already have a passing test. With Create React App comes Jest. So that is not something you have to install separate from your Create React App. Right? If you are building your React App from scratch, that will be a dependency that you have to include. Right? I would suggest just using Create React App. But cool. So we have a passing test. That's amazing. We didn't even do anything.
Did you do anything or just run a test?
I just ran a test. So if you look at your past React projects, they're pretty much all going to have this app.test.js, which was what was just run. Right? So cool, we have a passing test. It renders without crashing. Yes.
Quick question: Create React app. Does it have dashes in it?
Yes. Cool. So we've got a passing test, but now we need to install Enzyme. So I'm just going to pull up the Enzyme docs. Chrome. I'm going to look up Enzyme. Boom. Thanks, Airbnb, here at the top of my list. So when trying to figure out how we're going to install this, and if you ever forget, come to the docs. It's laid out in a relatively easy to follow fashion. So there's two things we need to be able to run Enzyme. We need Enzyme, and then we need an adapter for React 16. So those are two things we're going to install. So I'm going to go ahead and do this right now. Yeah. And this is going to take a minute. And so again, what Enzyme is going to allow us to do is to shallow render our app or our components, right? Because that's how we're going to be able to test. We can test, the component did mounts, the component did unmounts. We can test all of those things with calls from Enzyme. Jest itself is like a unit testing framework, and you can use it to run tests like we did Mocha and Chai. But Enzyme is what is allowing us to render our React components for the tests. As far as the adapter goes, they have adapters for different versions of React, so I assume that it is just making sure that it is up to date and maintaining backwards compatibility for different versions of React. But I'm not 100% on that.
You're going to have to do this each time you build a React app, right?
Correct. I'm also going to get rid of all these semicolons
Sick.
because I don't like them.
What's the difference between Enzyme and Jest again?
Enzyme, Jest is just like a testing framework. Enzyme allows us to actually render our components. Already?
Oh, it wasn't? Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say this because I heard you saying something.
Well, we're still loading. Any questions up to this point? Caroline, is that a hand? No. Okay. So I thought kind of the app that we would build is a to-do list. I think that it's not overly complicated. there should be plenty of things that we can test in there. So with that, we need to come up with some components that we have to build. But we're not going to build the components yet. We're going to write some tests, and then we're going to build the components around those tests. So the first thing, even before we get there, this is just taking forever. Oh, it's done. Yes. So in this installation walkthrough, we need to configure Enzyme to use the adapter you want it to use. So we basically need to create a file like this. And it does matter what you call this file. I was having some issues with it earlier, and I believe the way that we need to do it is to create a file called setuptests.js. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called setuptests.js. I'm going to copy paste this Enzyme adapter code in from right meow.
These frameworks only work with React.
I think Enzyme is React specific, Jest is not. Need a new line there. Great. Let's see, I'm just going to try to run tests again and see if anything breaks. One passed. Renders without crashing. Hooray. That's great. Love that. Alright, so I'm going to make a nice test folder. And there is a naming convention for Jest test. You can call it the name of the component .test.js. So every time you make a test, Jest knows that it is a test when you have the .test.js. So all of your tests need to have that. So I'm going to make a nice test folder. Test. And then let's see. What do you think the first thing we need to do in this application is? We know that app renders without crashing, so that's fine. That test was built in. I guess first let's discuss what components we want to build. So for a to-do app, let me see if I can just do this up here. Nope, I'm gonna draw it on the board. Do you mind if I erase this? Is that fine? Can anybody think of some components that we're going to need for a to-do list app?
Need a list.
Need a list? Very true. Yeah. Alright, so we're going to need a list. What else? Yeah, I'm going to put app on top of here just because that's the parent. We need a form. Great. List item. Yep. That'll probably have an erase form. And then put list item here. Form.
I just say
Okay. List item.
Add an item.
Add an item. Is it a button, or do you want that to be a separate component? Because we do need some way to add them, right? I feel like that would fall under form. Anybody disagree? Great. Anything else? That's probably pretty much it, right? We can have a delete button on our list item. We can have our submit button in our form. So I think that these are the three components that we're probably going to want to deal with. So, list is a great place to start. So let's write some tests for list. So in my test folder, I'm going to make a new file called list.test.js. Let's see, my tests are running. Ah, cool. Oh, I thought I was going to say 2 passed. 1 passed, 1 failed.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you're running your tests, what is the command that you're putting in? Because mine's not working. I want to make sure I'm doing the right
I was doing npm run test, or maybe I did npm test. I don't remember. Try run test or test. Nothing working.
Setup test is in the folder of test.
It is not. It is in the source.
You meant to do that?
Yes. I think that's where it default looks for it. You can change the place of it, but then you have to set up that configuration in your package.json, which there is documentation on the Enzyme site of how to do that. But I'm just going to put it in source. So we don't need this anymore. We know that works, which is great. Test suite failed to run. Your test must contain at least one test. Huh. All right, cool. That's not too bad. So we need to write a test, but first we need to import Enzyme into our project. So we're going to import, actually I'm just going to do shallow, because that's all we're really going to be using, from Enzyme. Also for all of these, you still need to import React. Import React from React. We're also going to want to import like our component, which we don't have yet. So that's going to throw an error, so we're going to leave it out for now. So really similarly to what we had done this morning with Mocha and Chai, what are my tests going to look like?
You're going to have to describe.
Yep. And in this, we're going to describe the component, because I always like to write the thing that it is. So whether it's a function or a component, this is the component, and we're going to call it component list. Next argument that we pass in, function. Great. So it. Why is main thread always doing that? It escape. Should what? Yeah. Render without crashing. Great. Let's see what happens with our tests. Ooh, oh, one failed. From what? Oh. It auto-imported that dang isMain thread as well. Okay, cool. Save again. Watch them run again. I get rid of this file explorer. 2 pass. Woo! We wrote our first passing test. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not testing anything. Right? Yes.
Can you go back to your setup.test file?
Are you recording this?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Here's my setup.test file.
Yeah.
I literally copy and pasted it exactly. And remember, this isn't exactly a code along. It's we need to be able to write these tests together. So if you do want to, that's cool. But the main goal is to be able to go through it and ask questions, and then you'll be able to do it, hopefully, better on your own if you participate. Yeah, what's up?
Should component list be wrapped in those element tags?
Component list, no. It will be when we shallow render it, but for now it is not. So actually, like render without crashing, anything we write here, well, let's see. So we haven't done a wrapper. So let's look at what that looks like. So we have a const wrapper, and this is kind of a convention in Enzyme. You always call this the wrapper. Equals shallow, and then shallow, and then what you want it to render. So we're going to have it render list, which it doesn't have access to, and it's going to get angry at us, and it's going to fail. So let's see what happens. One failed, one passed. List is not defined. Great. What do we need to do to define list? Import it. What's going to happen now? Nope, never created list. All right, cool, let's create list. All right, so in source, I'm going to make a new folder, components, make a new file, list.js. And here I'm going to do my standard React stuff, const. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. List equals a thing. It returns. How about an H1 that says list? Great, new line. New line. There you go. So that's happy. We have it. Oh, boom, 2 passed. We're still not testing anything though, right? So all we told our test to do was to shallow render list. So now, what can we test to make sure that it's actually there?
Add a colon somewhere in list.
Add a colon somewhere in list?
Break it with like a, yeah, put like a colon right there.
Right here?
Sure.
Okay.
Or something that works.
1 failed, 1 passed. Oh yeah, that broke. Syntax error, unexpected token. That's not a bad way. We know that it did fail now, so our test is testing something. It's going in and it's trying to render this component. But remember the kind of format that we used earlier with like the expect and things like that? Those are the things that are actually, it's going to run like an assertion and be like, hey, I want this to equal this. So let's go look at the docs. So Enzyme, we know installation, shallow rendering, at, child at, children, closest, contains. We can check to see if it contains something. Oh, whoa, exists? Huh, and then we don't even have to pass a selector in, we can just see if it exists. So we could do some class to equal true, could do some other class. I'm just going to say dot exists and see what happens. So expect wrapper exists. Let's see what happens. Just ignore these lines. Yeah, what's up?
Well, with these expect, aren't you going to have to import chai or no?
Nope.
Okay.
So I think Jest kind of comes with its own assertion library.
Oh, sweet.
So we don't need to use chai or assert. Cool. Exists. Ooh, 1 failed, 1 pass. Dot exists is not a function. Great. So we had some syntax errors here. Expect wrapper dot exists. Oh, okay. Put it in the wrong spot. Let's double check. Wrapper dot exists and then our parentheses. Okay. Well, that passes. And we could be this to equal true because this is going to return a Boolean. So we do want a to equal true. It might be. I'm not sure though. We could read this returns whether or not any nodes exist in the wrapper, or if a selector is passed in, whether that selector has any matches in the wrapper. So selector and an optional enzyme selector. And it returns a Boolean. So you do want to check to see what it returns. Right? So it might be implied, but you kind of want to be explicit with it so that you can control what the test is actually testing. So fail. Expect cannot read property equal of undefined. Interesting. Dot to equal true. You don't need to find anything. We're not looking for a class. Huh. I wonder why that does that. Cannot read property equal of undefined. Is that saying that 2 is undefined? This should render without crashing. Let's see what happens if we do, I don't want the whole line. Yeah. It's going to pass, and if we try to break the list, Or we could even put a selector in there. Exists h1 to equal true. Let's see what happens with that. Ooh, boom, one failed. So wrapper exists cannot read property equal of undefined. I don't know. So expect wrapper exists h1. I believe that we do want to make sure that it equals true, because otherwise we're not really comparing it against anything, and we want to get that return value and make sure that it is true. Another way that you could do this, since this is kind of stymieing us a little bit, where is it? Dot find. So we can find like an h1 in there, which is kind of a brittle test. Does anybody know what I mean by a brittle test? Not quite. Not a bad guess. Easily broken, right? So yeah, easily failable. So if we're just checking for a particular like tag, like what if somebody goes through and makes it an H2, then the test fails. And does that really validate anything? Like it doesn't really. You can put whatever tag you want there. Maybe you're looking for like a class name, right? It's a little bit better because that's going to apply all the CSS styles. And so you want to make sure that something with that class name exists. A selector alone is not that great. But what we could do is do wrapper dot find. What was it? We didn't give it a class. We don't want to give it a class. Dot find. Let's say list to equal not. Why did it autocorrect me?
I think it's two capital E equal the yes dots.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
You want that to be false.
In the jest
I want it.
dots on the inside dot.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Where were you?
I was on the Enzyme docs.
There's also like 2B.
It is a question. Expect. Boom, there it is. Thanks, Zeke. Yeah, 2 equal. That looks better. So let's go back over here and say 2 equal. So find list is going to return. Find should actually return like an array of nodes. 2 equal is not a function. Wrapper.find. So let's do wrapper dot, what was it? Wrapper dot exists. Exists selector dot exists is equal true. Let's see if that breaks. Oh, boom, one failed. You know what a great place to look?
Oh, try putting another friend after that exists open close. Try putting a closing friend after that, and then getting rid of the one at the end.
Ooh, yeah.
I
I
think
like that too.
you have to get rid of the one at the end
Oh, right. To pass. There we go. Thanks, Sean. Great. So now we have a test to make sure that our component is rendering. Like, great. All right. So what else do we want our component to do? So what happens if we don't have any items in our to-do list? Send back an empty array? Then why don't we display like a message of some sort? Like, nothing to do. Great. So it should display nothing to do when an empty or when no props are passed. Great. So we have a second test. Is this going to pass or fail?
Pass.
It's going to pass. I'm not testing anything. Boom. 3 passed. Great. So again, we want to make a wrapper. There's a shallow render of list.
And an OG shallow.
Thank you. And this is going to be very common, right? You'll follow this kind of pattern through a lot of your tests. You always need to map the wrapper with a shallow render, and there are other render methods that you can do that you can access more things, right? But for our purposes today, shallow is going to work well. So let's see. So yeah, what's up?
And you want to initialize a new wrapper for every single individual test, or could you like initialize that to describe the log?
I think it depends, because you can do before each loop, so it runs a certain thing before each of your tests. So if you wanted to, you could probably like do it before each that creates a wrapper. But if you're wanting to pass props into your component, then that's not going to work very well, right? So that is absolutely something you can do, though. There's like before each and after each hooks, or before all and after all hooks. So you can set up before you run all of the tests. All right, so we're going to make our shallow list. And if it doesn't have any props, which we've passed none in, then it should display nothing to do. So we'll do expect. Actually, let's make another thing. Const message equals wrapper dot find, and we're going to look for a certain class. So we'll do message. So then we expect message.
Is that dot necessary when we're accessing the class name like this?
Yeah, it's a selector. So same as you would in CSS, you're always going to have the dot. If it was an ID, you'd have a hash. If it is just an element, then you need nothing. So we're going to expect message. What? What's like a non-brittle way that we can try to figure out a way? Non-brittle way to figure out a way. What's a way that we can test that a message is displaying if no props are passed in? That wouldn't break just like every time we tried to change the message, or maybe the element tag.
Maybe that specific message has a class name.
Okay, so we search for class. Do we just want to see if it exists? We could. I don't think that would be the worst thing. Right? Make sure that if list has no props, so it doesn't have anything to like generate a list of things to do, that it has something, a message somewhere, that it renders that. Expect message to equal true. Or message.length to be 1. You can test these things. Let's say exists to equal true again. So now we should have a failing test. Boom, one failed. To equal true. Received false. So there is nothing with the class of message. Great, so we got another failing test. What about if it does have props, so it has a list of things to do? Let's make a new it block and say it should display, we're going to change this to a message when no props are passed. It should display list items when props are passed. Same thing. All right, but now, how are we going to pass props to this shallowly rendered component?
Same way you normally attach props.
Yep. Yep, exactly. So we're going to say, we'll just say to do items equals an array. That's got to be in curlies. Of, let's say, eat breakfast. All right, so now we have passed a prop to that. So we're going to be looking for something else now. We're going to be looking for a list item. Right, and we just passed it 1. So we expect the length of our list items to be what? We're going to do this wrapper.find again. And that's going to give us back like an array of nodes. So we expect, well, let's do const to do items equals wrapper.find. We'll go for this class and we're going to call it to do item. I'm going to expect to do items dot length let's see, to do items, do I need a, don't believe I do, to equal 1. Right, and that should fail. So we're going to find all the things with the class of to-do items, and then we're going to expect the length of that to equal 1. Again, in all these tests, you're going to want to have hard values for the things that you're testing against. You don't want this to be an algorithm of any sort. You want it to be true or 1 or a string or something, right? A hard value. Okay, so let's see. Should fail. Boom, 2 failed, 2 passed. Great. So now what can we do? Let's write some code to make these tests pass. Before we do that, does anybody have any questions about what we've done up to this point?
I got a question.
Yes, great.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding us passing props, and we're just passing that array of to-do items, and that is part of the test, so that we know it's equal to 1. But if we already had items in the list, it would still use what we put in our test anyway. You see what I'm saying? Like if someone put items in their list before we got to test it, for example, but we still have this test written as to-do items is only the length of 1 test group. If we wrote it right, it would pass.
Right. So this won't have anything to do with like the state and the props that we're passing in the components that we're going to write.
Yeah.
This is just going to be on the testing suite. So that when this renders, it's only going to get what we give it.
Nice.
Any other questions?
Are you importing anything else at the top of that test?
React, shallow, and the list component.
You said there is the
Yeah, but I can keep going on something.
Cool. All right. So let's delete all this boilerplate. Yeah. I don't want any of this. And did we make a list? We made a list. Great. So we have an H1 that says list. If we pass nothing in here, it should give us what again? Should render something with the class of message. So in our return, let's do a ternary. Because if it has props, then we want it to render them. If it doesn't, we want it to render this message. So we're going to do, what is it? We'll do props dot to do items dot length is greater than 0, right? Oh, yeah, 0. That makes sense.
You just do props dot to do items, and if it's there, it's null.
Well, I was going to instantiate it as an array. I could instantiate it as null, and then that would be valid. So we can do that. That's fine with me. So props.todoItems.length. So just props.todoItems, and then if that's true, we want to render a list, right? So we'll do props.todoItems.map item, and then we're going to return like a div with a class name of, what did we say it was going to be? For the to-do items, they're going to be called to-do item. So to-do item, and then I'm not going to do anything with the item really. We're just going to return one of these for every time. And if props.todoItems is false, what were we going to return again? A message. So we'll do like an h2 with the class of message to do.
Or true case means wrapping div is array. That's that's.
Which one?
Like in the true case, if we generate more than one HTML.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So could we just put like a React fragment up here? I think that'll. Good catch. So props isn't defined, so we're going to pass it in here. And this empty components are self-closing. Cool, I can handle that. Okay. So now this is taking in props. If it has props, it'll render them, and if it doesn't, then it won't. So let's see how our tests are doing. Dun, 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 dun. 4 passed. Woo! So now we have 4 passing tests. Right? This still doesn't like quite work because we haven't done anything in app. We're not passing it any items. So I'm going to go ahead and we could do this in testing app, right? So what does app need to do? App needs to render the list, doesn't it? So app.test.js, it renders without crashing. I'm going to put all that in a describe block. What are we describing? Component app. Okay, so it renders without crashing. It renders the list component. So we need to import Enzyme, or Shallow rather. So we need to const wrapper equals what does wrapper always do? Yep, shallow. What are we rendering? Right, app. So we're shallow rendering app, and then we're going to do const list equals wrapper.find list, because we're just looking for that element list. and then expect list.toExist to be true. Should fail. Boom, one failed. List.toExist. What was that again? Like that? Oh. List.exists. Good, one failed. To be expected true, received false. Woo! Test is working. Import list from /components/list. Put list in there. And now we're cooking with fire, right? So that is kind of like the basics, right, of how you're going to test React apps. There's a lot more that you can do. You can test state, you can test props, but I feel like I'm losing you a little bit, and I would like questions where things are hazy, or if you'd like to take a different direction, or should I just keep plugging away? What's up?
I may have missed this, but could you really briefly go over what shallow is?
So it is. It actually renders your component. It like creates that component and gives you access to everything that that component should be doing. So that's state, that's props, that's the elements that are inside of it, but it doesn't actually render the children, right? So it is just that one level. But it does give you access to all of those things. You can't do anything with the DOM really, but you can with other things. So like there's shallow rendering. How do I make you smaller? Collapse. There's full DOM rendering, static rendering, etc. So there are other things that you can do, but shallow rendering in particular is for testing a component as a unit.
So what's the other option if it's not a shallow render? It's a real render?
Kind of. It's like there's full DOM rendering, which would render the children.
Where would it render them? Into the browser?
Nope. It's all kind of behind the scenes. It's kind of like when we were talking about integration tests yesterday, or like it happens in the nether. There's some that have a headless browser that you can like watch it do its thing. This is in the nether, right? Huh? It's magic. It's true. Which is why you want your tests to fail, right? Because if they never fail, it's all magic anyway. They don't fail, you can't know if you did something right. And as far as like we talked about brittle tests, like tests that are easily breakable, that's something that comes in time, right? Like I'm not the best at not writing brittle tests because I have only written Mocha tests pretty much until this week. So don't worry too much about that. The goal is to get really comfortable with the syntax so that you can just run around and test all sorts of stuff, right? Because that's if your job does end up doing a lot of testing, that is what is to be expected, right? You understand some of the syntax and what its purpose is. Do you want to try to test something else? Yeah? What should we test?
Something in state.
Something in state? All right. So, let's see. Let me make some state real quick. So, constructor, super.
You just do this state, people's object.
People's object?
People's object. This state instead of all that stuff.
Yeah, that's true because we're not using any props in this because it's
Yeah,
at. All right.
You got Apple.
not a hipster.
Yeah, you are. Or is it just state? I think it's this, right? Is it just, there might not even be this, okay, just state.
Use this because it's got the construction.
Yeah.
Means you're a hipster, yeah. I went through this whole thing with Brooks.
And then what does that say?
Unexpected token.
So it's not this state? There's a way to do that. Have you noticed?
It is, I'm pretty sure it is this dot state, but JS standard is pissed about it.
JS standard. More like JS schmandard.
It wants the constructor, but I don't think we have to give it to it. So we'll say to do items equals, wait, null. Okay, so let's see, did that break everything? One failed. Yep, that did break everything. So if we just do state, is that going to break everything? Bypassed. Each child on the list should have a unique key prop. Yeah. Okay. So state equals an object. And we've got to do items is null. What do we want to test? So we've got something in state. We want to like change it or something, right? So how could we test that? We kind of need some more things to be able to test whether state will change when we do something, don't we? Like we need like an input so that we can add stuff to the input and then have that go to state. So how about we make a function? No, wait, we're going to test first. So in app.test, so we expect it to render the list component. It updates state appropriately when add item button is clicked. Great. So, how are we going to do this? Start at the same place we always do. Wrapper equals shallow app. But now what? Yeah. How should I behave, or how should I write this test? I don't know. So I imagine that we're gonna have like a button in here somewhere, right? That we're gonna like click, and then we expect state to update with whatever that button passes or something. That'll like run a function, something like that. So let's say that we're gonna find this button, const. We'll call it submit equals wrapper.find. We're gonna give this a class of submit button. So we're looking for something called submit button, an item with a class of submit button. But that's still not testing anything. So I think that we can make it click. So let's see what happens with that. I think that might be in Jest, or nope, Enzyme. Simulate error, simulate event. Name of event to be simulated. So wrapper.find this, simulate, click. We can simulate a click, hooray. So we're gonna come over here and do .simulate click. But that's still, I don't think that's quite it. We're gonna need that, but we also need to have something in the input, or maybe it'll just post something random to state, but we have to have like a value to test against. Like, what do we expect state to be after this? So we know that it started empty. Could we test that like the length of state is 1 now? Because, you know, if we don't have an input, maybe it'll just put an empty string in there. Yeah? Or is that a bad idea? All right, cool. I'm going to do it. So we don't really need this to be a variable, right? So we just need it to find that thing and click it. Then state. Oh, hey, there's state. Returns the state hash for the root node of the wrapper. So wrapper.state.whatever. So we're going to do expect wrapper.state.todo items. Cool. There's either way. There's two ways we can do it. We can pass it into the state function as a string or dot notate into it afterwards. So we're just going to do it this way. And then we want it to have a length of 1 because we're starting at 0, right? How do we do that? To equal is going to give us an array, and we could do to deeply equal and then have an array with a string, but I know there's a way to do this. There's gotta be. Child at children, maybe it's Jest. To match, to throw, to be truthy, to be undefined, to contain, that's not bad. To be falsy, to have returned, expect, length, there we go. To have length. To have length 1. Update state appropriately when add item button is clicked. That description could be better. But let's see what happens. Save. It fails. Let's see why it fails. Method simulate is meant to be run on one node. 0 found instead. Cool, so we don't have that node. Okay, so let's go fix that. We're looking for something with a class of submit button. Button. Submit. Class name equals submit dash. Come on. Button. Okay. So we got something with class name of submit button. 6 passed. Why does that pass? We did something wrong. We just made a button and now it passes. Wrapper.find. Oh, that's the wrong. Wrapper.find, submit button, simulate, click. Did I not just write code there? Did I write it somewhere else? Oh, thanks, y'all. There we go. Now we should fail. 1 failed. Great. Expected value to have a length property that is a number. Received null. Woo!
Why would it click have a length?
Click doesn't have a length. So we're simulating click, and then we're expecting the to-do items piece of state to have a length of 1. And what have we set that as? Null. So let's go and fix that. We need to write a function. So over at we're going to do, what's it called? Add item.
Are you guys building this right now? This is super cool. This is a really good prologue. I hope it's helpful, but you've done it.
Thanks.
Yeah. For a guy who likes Vue, you're really good in React.
I'm really glad you're recording this.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit lost in code, but actually quite a bit lost.
That's the perfect thing to go back and watch though and do a burn.
Yeah.
I can understand why. We're just kind of burning along right now. So add item. This needs to take something from somewhere and add it to our state, right? It's kind of weird because, like, I feel like we don't have an input, so it's not actually going to have a value to add to state, which weirds me out, which makes me think that we should write another test about the input to make sure that the input changes things in state as well. And since we're already failing this test, like, might as well write another one, right? Let's see. Update state appropriately when add item button is clicked. Let's make another one above that. It updates state appropriately when user inputs item. Sure. All right. Same as it ever was. And Zeke, in this case, like, since we're not ever passing props to app, we could probably do a before each that creates this wrapper.
Gotcha.
But we're not going to do that. So we've got that. And then we're going to find tag, we'll call it to do input. And then we're going to do something. Like, type something in, right? I think that would be the right thing to do. Is that going to be in Jest? Maybe an Enzyme? Mount name not event.
You guys see in this process right now, this is like how it really goes down. Lots of confusion. Guilt. Anger.
Clicks one, simulate, click. That's too easy. I don't want to just click. I want to type something. Can I run a... How would I test that function alone and state? Because we should have access to the function from this. So if we shallow app, and then what happens when we run... How do we run a function? In React. Run function in React with Jest. React component methods with Enzyme. Oh, Enzyme's got something for that? Beautiful. Wrapper.instance. Home component. Buttons and a piece of counter state. Testing increment counter indirectly. You just simulate a click event. Click events again. We could run it in a lifecycle method, but like the idea is that we call the function and give it some stuff and it updates state, and we want to make sure that whatever we gave it is what is in state now. Which everybody's got click examples. Ooh, Jest.spy. Let's see.
I'm curious, like because we're going above and beyond with respect, but like, is there a way just to test if something is state is like true or false?
Yeah, sure. So the way that you would do that is expect wrapper.state.todo items to be X or Y or true or false or 3. You could do to be or to equal. Since we're dot notating into the object, unless the value of that key is another reference data type, you can just use to be. Because in Jest, to equal is the same as to deeply equal.
Why?
I don't know. That's a great question. And it is confusing, right? I just learned this the other day. To be is a shallow equal. to equal is a deep equal.
I think that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
It kind of does, but just because this morning we did mocha and it's like to equal and to deeply equal.
It only makes sense because it's like backwards in the first place. Yeah.
Fair enough. But yeah, if you just wanted to check if like your initial state in your component was what you wanted it to be, you just use this expect statement and then like to be or to equal something. So for instance, if we didn't want, where are we? List exists to be true, update state. So if we wanted to just check initial state, so it renders the list component, cool, it has an initial state of, let's say, to do items, we're just going to say, yeah, items is a string that says hi. Oh, no. No. Yep. And boom. Okay. Then we could do has initial state of 2 items equal hi. You're going to start it the same as we've started all of them. Const div, or I read div right there. Wrapper equals shallow app. And then we'd say expect wrapper dot state dot to do items to be hi. Boom, come on, give me that failing test. 2 failed, 6 passed. Expected value to have a length property that is a number, received null. That was our original failing test. Expected string but received null. Great, so let's fix that. Oh, hi. Boom. That one passes now. Expected value to have length. Received hi. Received dot length 2. Great, so now our other test is failing for a different reason. Right? But that's okay. We could cheat and make them both pass right now, but we'd have to alter the test. And this is not how you want to write your tests. So if we wanted that just to be h, we're expecting a length of 1 when this button is clicked. It's always a length of 1 because that's its initial state. Right? And that's why it's important that you it takes a lot of thought to write tests and code. So when we talked about pros and cons of testing, one of the pros, which is also a con, is that you have to, well, it's a con for me just because I like to, yeah. But one of the pros is really that you have to think about your code and how it is going to function before you write it. Right? That also means that you have to think about your tests and how you're going to test in meaningful ways that are actually going to add value in the long term. Cool, I feel like it's definitely break time. Do y'all want to do more of this? I feel like it would be hyper beneficial for you to play with tests on your own instead of watch me do this, because all of the methods that you need are in the docs, in the Jest docs and in the Enzyme docs. However, I'm happy to stay up here and continue to code tests, but I would ask that you take at least a 5-minute break before we would continue. What's up?
When do you know to use Enzyme docs and when do you know to use Jest?
I don't. If I can't figure out how to make it work, because what's cool is that a lot of these things, you just kind of type what you think it'll be in English, and then you try it, and then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And if it's telling you that whatever you typed is wrong, just go ahead and look at the docs for both and see if you can find something that you want in one of them. Yeah. What's up?
When you installed Enzyme, I keep getting a shell is not defined whenever I test. So I was wondering if I just didn't install Enzyme correctly, because I'm
Uh-huh. Are you importing Enzyme or destructuring shallow out of Enzyme?
So at the top of the test, or at the setup test, I did that page like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then up top, I'm not importing it, like, why.
Yeah, you need to import shallow from Enzyme at the top of your test file. And you'll destructure shallow out of Enzyme. Como AC.
When would we need Enzyme
Oh.
or Jest over just regular mocha chai?
So Mocha and Chai is really good for just like testing functions in vanilla JavaScript, as far as I know. Jest and Enzyme are more specifically for testing React components. Like you could use Mocha and Chai if you had like a separate file of helper functions for your React app, and you wanted to just test all of those. Yeah, Mocha Chai. I'm sure Jest could do it too. But when you're actually testing the React components and what they're doing, that's when you need Jest and Enzyme.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is there, so I've been coding along.
Mhm.
But, I definitely made some mistakes along the way, and just to have this as.
What, Stephanie?
What?
You made mistakes along the way?
I did.
Coding along?
I admit it. It was
What?
me. I did it. Are you able to like make this a repo and
Yeah, for sure.
so I can compare and just see where I went wrong, because I was trying to look back and.
Yeah, I can push this like right now.
The parentheses
Yeah.
and stuff like this is just like, what?
Well, that's what that it seems, it says a syntax error, it's pointing to parentheses, that they look right to me, so.
Did I see that you exported,
I never. Oh, you're talking about the setup test file? It's literally the exact same one that's on their site.
This is a different thing.
This
I just copy and pasted it.
but it's not, it's still telling me that,
Is it telling?
that I can basically
Maybe
make
that's
after.
just a.
Oh, it's telling you need the adapter. Did you make sure to call this setup tests?
Setup test. Oh, there's an S at the end?
I think so.
Not that I'm tired.
I dealt with that. I dealt with that exact same thing for like 20 minutes 2 days ago. I was like, but I did it. And then I found an example. It is tests.
I don't know after.
Yes, they are, they're delicious.